This is a tutorial for the Shade Sewn Data tool you can find in my Cloth Sewing Toolbox, available on Gumroad and BlenderMarket. This tool allows to take all the custom UV data created by all the other tools in the pack and convert them into height map to create seampuckering and much more in an easy way. So once you've added the asset pack path into the file path of the asset browser, I recommend to use the link import method so that everything can be updated when I release new updates of the pack. And to showcase this tool, I have the demo 3D model of this asset pack, which basically adds all the modifier of the asset pack onto a single object. So first, let's create a material on the cap, and let's drag in our Shade Sewn Data subgroup. So the node group looks like this, and is pretty simple, but has a bunch of inputs. So let's move on to the viewport shaded view, and here I will start by shading the data created by the hem modifier, which in this case create all the hem and the sewing on the bottom of the cap. So as you can see on the side, the modifier creates a bunch of attributes, which I explained in another tutorial, but to shade everything using this group, you can use two different attributes. The first is the custom UV map, which in this case I called UV hem low, and the second attribute that will be useful will be the processed islands, which in this case I renamed processed hems low. And now if I take a look at those attributes, you can see that the UV hem low data is only relevant on some parts, so for example not on the visor, and this is confirmed by the processed hem low group, which is just a boolean field in this case, which will just say to the tool where we want to shade our data. And this is really important. And here we need to use attributes node even for the UV map, because I am actually using all three components of a vector, and a UV map inside Blender only has two components. And let's plug those attributes into the group. So the factor of the process hem low will go into the process input, and the vector inside the UV map input. And right away we can see that a few attributes have already been created. We have a first version of the puckering, which is going perpendicularly to the UV map, and a crease for the stitches. So first for the puckering we have two settings, which are the scale of the effect. So this is basically the scale of this wave texture, and the width of the effect. Then for the crease, we can also change the width of the effect to have a really sharp crease, for example, and also its position. We can set perpendicularly to the created hem to more precisely place it right under the stitch. And in this case, I can add some vector bump node, so I can use the stitch crease as a negative bump value and the puckering as a positive one, and then with a way lower distance, we'll be able to have a really nice shading where we placed our tool in a quite efficient way. Then I also offer a third functionality besides seampuckering and stitch crease, which is to mix color. So this can be really useful to use the proximity created by the modifier which generated this data to blend any kind of image texture. Here, for example, I can create a new texture of type color grade, which I can just set its coordinate to the general UV map of my model and use this color as the new color input of this node, so that the texture will be applied on the side of everything, and you can also set the color of the rest of the zone, and you can also, of course, set the width of this blending effect. Now in my case, as I explained earlier, I have a bunch of other modifiers, so I'll just show the general workflow of working with all of this. Let's say I also want to shade the data created by the seam modifier, which created all the seam between the side panels. Here, this is created by the panel's seam modifier, and the output data are UV seams for the UV attribute, and the processed island is called processed seams. So here I can just duplicate this node, plug in my UV map and my process factor, which of course also creates the attributes right where we want them, but now we can also chain those node groups one after the other to blend all the height maps and the color maps more easily. So I can plug in the puckering into the previous puckering input, stitch crease into the previous stitch crease input, and now I can also output my puckering and stitch crease to the bump nodes. So here everything has been combined really easily. And we could of course do the same for the color by plugging the color output of the previous node into the previous color input. And here I can also blend different texture, so for example a noise texture right here, which would give a color map looking like this in this case. And this is already everything you need to know about this Shade Sewn Data node group, which can be a really handy tool to create the starting point for your shading data, allowing to convert the custom UV map created by the other tools in the pack into really nice data, which can emulate what you would have to manually do in Substance Painter or other workflows. Because here the main point is that if we compare the general UV map of the mesh, which just creates data in an upwards direction corresponding to the UV unwrapped version of our mesh, here are the data created by the tool, is comprised of custom UV maps, which always follow the topology of the side on which you added the tools, whether they are the seams, the hems, the stitches, the objects or curve bindings, and so on. And this all basically allows to add precise shading along edge group selection, just like you would draw on a curve on some other softwares. Now, this Shade Sewn Data node group is mainly intended as a starting point, so don't hesitate to take a look at what's inside and modify it to your likings to create shader nodes that more closely fit your needs. Thank you so much for watching. If you still have any question about the tool or the asset pack, make sure to leave them in the comments so I can improve the documentation or the asset pack in the future, and see you next time.